You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to Barbell Logic, Beast Over Burden podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Sims, coach over at Barbell Logic and the Chief Experience Officer. With me is one of my favorite people in the world.
Oh.
Andrew Jackson, also a coach, and he's the Chief Experience. Nope, that's not what he is. That's
Definitely
me.
Not. Yeah.
He's the Chief Operations Officer.
I would be the Chief of Terrible Experience Officer.
Like, how can we fit this behavior into a spreadsheet? And today you're with us on the week of Thanksgiving, which is why I'm wearing my turkey sweatshirt. You probably can't see it, but you can hear it. Thank you, Andrew. It looks like gobble gobble. I've been practicing that for a while.
Nice.
So we thought this would be a good time to talk about behaviors that one could choose to employ around the holiday season, around nutrition and around training. We're actually going to talk about training next week. Today we're going to talk about nutrition.
Holiday eating and training series.
Because you are going to be eating over the next several weeks. If there's one thing I am sure of, you're going to be eating. And coming from, summer and then into fall, we get pretty clear goals in mind. And then into this time of year, things might be a little more relaxed. But, when January, February rolls around, sometimes there's a little bit more of you. And we thought we could talk about ways to make sure you're moving in the direction that you want to be moving in.
Sometimes that's the way people want to go.
For sure.
If that's your goal,
what you want, we will
can
help
talk
you.
about those strategies too.
So we were talking about this on a walk the other morning. And one thing we talked about in terms of strategies that we use to help our clients is adding up how many days of fun there are between now and the end of the year. And when we tally that up, it actually gets to be quite a bit. So part of those days would be like the day before Thanksgiving, where you arrive, maybe you're traveling or people are coming to stay with you. That usually is a little tougher to kind of navigate opportunities for going out to eat or having people over, eating some foods that you might not always eat. And then Thanksgiving Day is one for sure. Could be brunch, big dinner, bunch of pies. Sometimes there are a bunch of pies. You laughing at bunches of pies?
No, I'm just wondering how many meals we're going to describe. And
I'm actually really hungry. So I've only had breakfast in our X bar, so
starting to get a little nervous right now because I think we're hitting a little bit of a danger zone.
I just had an RX bar.
Okay.
Strategy number 1, have RX bars around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so with more brevity. Thanksgiving Day, leftovers from Thanksgiving. And then we roll into like Christmas parties, usually more boozing. If you work in an office, there just are like always delicious cookies and, trying really hard not to talk about all the treats. Christmas Day.
This is going to turn into like the Bubba Gump shrimp. There's the apple pies and the cherry pies and the pumpkin pies and the gingerbread cookies.
Cobbler,
the sugar snap.
Tort.
Do you enjoy this time of year?
I love eating. And then we get into New Year's, and you brought up a day, which I had not considered initially, that rolls around early next year.
The old Super Bowl comes in, which I think is the kind of the last holiday meal adventure before people have a little bit of breathing room, usually.
Yeah. And kind of it turns into, like, that's a mindset that can happen. Well, it's like, Christmas is around the corner. I don't feel like I'm ready to try, or there's no reason to constrain. And then Super Bowl really adds it onto that, where it's like, Super Bowl is coming. I don't think I want to dial things in yet. Yeah. So just like, it's the middle of November and all of a sudden it's the middle of February.
Yeah. And I think the key takeaway that you were getting at with adding up the number of days and thinking about this stretch of time is that it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a quarter of the year that is potentially feasting.
Yeah. Where that F it mentality is like,
more
likely to happen.
Feast over burden.
Feast over burden. Yes.
And
Beasts who are feasts. Beastin' and feastin'.
so, to just completely take the guardrails off during this period of time, which I have certainly done in the past, can really kind of set you back from your goals.
Yeah.
If your goals are to maintain a certain body composition, or if your goals are to, or if you have been in a recomposition and entering a series of situations where you're presented with choices to make. And so I think what we wanted to talk about were strategies that you could take into these scenarios, these feast scenarios that are coming to help you support your goals, the long-term goals.
Yeah. So it's really this simple. You are going to gain weight if you eat at a caloric surplus, and that might be exactly what you want. But there might also be a limit to how much weight you want to gain.
Right.
So what if we work our way back from a couple different goals that people might have?
Okay, that sounds good. I also want to add one of the things that we talked about when thinking about how many days that it adds up to, the amount of time that it adds up to, is how difficult it is to maintain a caloric deficit,
Yeah.
a calorie deficit, consistently over a long period of time in order to lose weight, where usually we're aiming for somewhere between maybe 250 to 500 calories of a deficit per day.
Which feels a lot when it's taken away.
Exactly. When you're trying to control your calories, that seems like a lot, but when you're talking about some of these feasts, adding the equivalent of a week's worth of caloric deficit, when, you're trying to think about 7 times a week that you're trying to maintain 200 to 500 calories, you're somewhere between 1,400 to 3,500 calories in a week of a deficit that you're trying to maintain. I can eat 3,500 calories without even batting an eye.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe somebody who hasn't tracked, that might sound like a lot.
Yeah.
But if you've ever tracked your calories through the holidays, it
boy.
is not a problem.
I mean, I've tracked my calories on a Sunday, been like, oh, dear me.
Yes.
How am I doing that?
Right.
Yeah.
The big eye opener for me was a 6-pack of IPAs and it wasn't like I sat down and was like, I'm going to drink a 6-pack of IPAs, but I drank 6 IPAs over the course of a day during the holidays. And it was over 1,000 calories. That's
sad.
That didn't even feel like
and you would
calories.
still be hungry drinking this. Like, you still have to eat.
That was just the beers. I almost hit, I was halfway to the 2,000 calorie recommended diet, which of course I don't follow that, but that's easily a third, maybe a quarter of the calories that I would typically aim for.
Yeah.
But without even trying or thinking about that contributing to my total calories.
Yeah.
Let alone all the pies.
So if a person has a goal and they've been in a deficit and they want to, continue to lose weight, what kind of behaviors would we need to see from them?
Well, the thing that I've used personally with the most success, if you will, is not having seconds, or maybe put in a more active way.
No second breakfast?
One plate.
Mm-hmm.
Build one plate of food that you really want to enjoy, that has all the things you want to eat, so that you're not restricting yourself from certain choices, but you're putting some bumper lanes on the quantity of food that you're eating.
It sounds like you're making yourself be very intentional with what you're choosing to eat.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, depending on the size of the plate.
Yeah. No serving plates.
You can
can't
usually
just take the turkey plate and add to it.
You can usually put a really good meal on one plate of food and have a little bit of everything. Thanksgiving gets a little tricky, but if you're going to have 2 plates, pick 2 plates maybe on Thanksgiving Day. But the point is, pick some sort of limit that prevents me in particular, when I've done this in the past, from this kind of binary mindset where I'm either weighing and measuring or I'm eating the entire pizza.
Yeah.
The day that really clicked for me was the Super Bowl example, because the Super Bowl party is typically one where I just didn't pay attention. And the year I was actually working with Jillian, I started working with Jillian in November and went through the holidays, went through this period of time with her, and kind of through her coaching, got to a point where I was much more aware of what I was eating. And at that Super Bowl party where I normally would have left feeling really gross and having eaten
So many snackies.
everything.
Yeah.
All the pizza, all the beer, the wings, the ranch delivery vehicles, otherwise
You
known
mean
as
celery?
vegetables or celery. I had one plate, 2 slices of pizza. I think I had 1 or 2 beers. I had some ranch delivery vehicles,
Mhm.
and that was it.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed all the food that was there.
You didn't have to just eat celery.
I didn't just eat celery, or I didn't have to sit there and be like, oh no, I can't. I still enjoyed the meal, but it contained the calories, so that I didn't overindulge.
Yeah, that's
So
smart.
that would be the thing, number one, that I would say. How about you? Do you have a go-to?
Another one that comes to mind is to eat like you normally would for the most part, like the going into the day. So like the morning of and maybe the evening after, depending on when you have that big meal. Meaning don't go to a Thanksgiving meal starving and not having eaten, because then you're more likely to gorge. Have a breakfast of eggs, have some oatmeal, like high protein, high fiber, because that gives you some fullness. And then you're already starting off by getting your protein, which Thanksgiving tends to be a meal where you can actually get a good amount of protein, but then it's a lot of turkey often. You'll just fall right asleep. Maybe that's what you
So
want.
you're not a fan of the fasting approach, like skipping meals or intermittent fasting?
That would really depend on the person. But if someone is, doing a cut, they're likely eating frequently to avoid, periods when they get really hungry, because that's when you start to make a little less rational food choices. So high protein when you can, and then like high fiber from like vegetables. Oatmeal, I think, is a good one because it gives you some fullness the morning of and the evening after, versus going in just on a complete empty stomach. Because then I think you really just end up eating way more than you would have if you rolled in not starving. You start pre-partying with protein.
That's what I was going to say, is
Yeah.
that I would probably not recommend intermittent fasting, although some people have a lot of success skipping a meal. But I think as an intermediate or an in-between would be to pull out everything except the protein. That would be maybe an
Exactly.
option. So have just the eggs or just the egg whites.
Yogurt.
Yogurt. Yeah. Really emphasize maintaining protein. And then you can dial back a little bit on the carbs and the fat on your breakfast and your lunch going into a day like Thanksgiving, or if you know you have a huge dinner coming, I think you can start to sort of pull back a little bit on the calories. But for somebody who's strength training, as our audience probably is, I definitely think maintaining protein throughout the day is a good strategy for
you'll
both
feel better.
satiety and then also getting your protein in targets.
When you're in a deficit, like you need the energy that it's a finer margin when you're cutting. Like we're trying to make sure you have enough energy to train without giving you excess weight. So if you don't eat, you might actually not be doing yourself any favors and end up being in a further deficit and then make training feel worse.
Right.
Yeah. While still getting, like when you do eat, then you might just not get as many nutrients as you would in that bigger meal. Also, keep a limit on your booze.
Yeah.
That's the sneakiest way for calories to come in. They
Liquid
interfere
calories.
with your food choices. They rob you of actual nutrient dense meals. Nothing good comes of it.
That's another one though, where, obviously none is ideal. That's just the truth of it. You are imbibing poison.
Yes. It's toxin all around.
And yet that's also not realistic for most people for whatever reasons. But I think picking some sort of limit is another option there, and that was what I had as an agreement with Jillian when I was working through nutrition with her to recomposition and lost 25, upwards of 30 pounds. It was that I had a certain number of drinks per day and then a total per week. And so that I always felt like I could make that choice, but there was a limit.
Yeah.
And I find that to be effective, and especially the combination of both the daily and the weekly.
Yeah.
Let's say it's 7 per week. You don't want to have all 7 in one day,
Right.
because you're going to tip into that decision making.
Yeah.
Danger zone.
Pizza, nachos start to sound too good.
If you have for most people, I think 2 drink per day, or maybe 3, depending on your size, you're still going to maintain pretty good decision making. But when you start tipping into that 3, 4, 5 range,
Yeah.
the decisions usually go downhill.
It's definitely a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And just to finish that point up is when you build one plate, limit your drinks, you have the power to pick things that are delicious. Like you might not want to waste it on some food item that is usually gross that you would usually eat. But you're like, maybe I don't actually want that. Or maybe I want to get a really nice bottle of wine and enjoy a glass from that.
Or just not as much of it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
would you, if you were limited to the plate strategy, eat as much stuffing? I don't know, pick the thing.
Right.
Whatever it would be.
Yeah.
And you're probably not going to eat as much.
Yeah.
But you could still eat some.
Eat some. And bring something that you're excited to eat too. Bring something with a lot of vegetables, a lot of acid, because that like kind of closes the loop on that high fat, dense food flavor.
Yeah. I'm repeating myself probably from a previous episode, but that was an interesting aha moment from reading that Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat book, which talked about why Thanksgiving is usually a tough meal.
Yeah.
Because there's just no acid in most, other than cranberry sauce.
Right. But if you bring a salad with some like pickled vegetables on it and like put that on your plate, you get a really good amount of tasty food that I think that kind of is a nice loop for the palate.
I think that's why I liked the New Mexico Thanksgiving so much, is that there's way more acid and way less
cheese.
dry meat.
Yeah. So what about someone who is in a surplus and they're not like the dirty bulk at all costs, but like kind of a strategic weight gain?
Well, I would say the same, but more. Or same, but different, as they say in Southeast Asia. Instead of one plate, maybe it's 2 plates.
Okay.
Instead of pulling back on calories on the non-big meals, just keep on sailing through. I would say the mindset aspect of it might be a bigger factor there. Because I can remember going through some holidays where I thought I was all about the bulk, but then I stepped on the scale at 285 and was uncomfortable with that. So be maybe mindful of what the long-term impact would be.
Yeah.
And make sure you're clear on your goals.
Right. And there's a delayed onset effect of eating. Like, you might feel initial bloat, increased water retention, and you're like, I've been eating like a turd sandwich and I haven't noticed it. And you kind of get a little cocky.
Yeah.
But you feel it a couple weeks later.
Yeah,
and
definitely
then it
comes
takes a
home
longer to go away. Yeah.
Comes home to roost for sure. But I would say just enjoy it,
Yeah.
That's a great season to be in.
Yeah.
If you're in the bulking season, I would say enjoy training, enjoy that phase of life.
Yes.
Because it's a lot of fun to eat. Although I do think there's diminishing returns in the excess calorie game. I do think I overdid it personally when I was bulking and kind of gave myself permission to, go off the rails. And I don't think that was contributing to building muscle after a certain point. It was just building extra fat, which, did in some ways help the numbers go up, but I don't think that was really helpful for long-term health, quality of life.
Yeah. It is really important to kind of zoom out.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, how am I going to feel in March when I have like a trip coming up?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, shoot, I can see the fluff and I don't want it.
Yeah.
So moderation is helpful.
I think that would be probably the difference is maybe it's not limiting to one plate, but having some limits, I think will probably support most people's goals better in the long term.
And even just sitting to think about it, what you're going to do is so helpful.
Right.
And you had this great point earlier today. We were training and you were talking about the word should. And I think one of the worst things you could do is enjoy yourself in the moment and then be upset about it and mad at yourself later.
Right.
Because you were enjoying yourself. You were, especially if you sit and think about what's going to happen, you were accepting what was going to occur and the effects, I guess we'll say. But then to, sit there in February and be mean to yourself about it, I think that would be actually worse.
Yeah, the concept of should, the more I think about it, the more ridiculous it seems. That at some point you would think about a thing that you did in the past that cannot change and impose upon yourself the idea that you should have done something different that you didn't do. But like you pointed out, it's not that you can't look back and learn from something that you did or want to do that differently in the future, but to almost like rob yourself of having
that good time.
done whatever that thing it was that
Right.
you did that was the best you could do at the time just seems ridiculous to me. But instead, the idea that makes more sense to me is to be more present, if you will, with the decision that you're making right now.
Yeah.
Certainly look back at the past and learn from decisions that you maybe
What worked, what didn't.
think was the best decision at the time,
Mhm.
and apply that wisdom to the moment. But don't beat yourself up for what you did in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems like a interesting mental martyrdom,
And you spend energy doing that instead of energy.
making the decision.
Yeah.
In the moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Well, I'll take a second to say we're going to do a Q&A episode before the end of the year. So if you have some questions about nutrition or for us about literally anything, send us an email, podcast@barbell-logic.com. We'd love to answer some of those questions. We also have an ebook that I suggest downloading, preparing for your nutrition strategies to get through the end of the year. It's called 7 Strategies. That can be found at barbelllogic.com/7-strategies. And it's a good workbook, a good read, because I really do think listening to this episode, planning out how you're going to feel or how you think you're going to feel in the moment at the table with the food, what your options are, and what you want to do to support your goal is really helpful. And the more tools you have to kind of inform your behaviors, the better.
Noticing that moment is the first step. Like that's the key. It's like, okay, I'm making this decision.
Yeah.
If you can get that, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any nuggets you want
Chicken nuggets.
to? Turkey nuggets? Gobble, gobble. Someone needs a sandwich. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we'll be back next week. We're going to talk about navigating training through the holiday season. So hope you liked this. If you did, we'd love a review and a share. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.